Okay, then we'll see how this works. Can anyone hear me? How's the sound? I'm trying something new. And I'm eating a Pop-Tart. Hello, Albie. How's my audio? Good, awesome. Let me get the stories up. So I went to Texas, and I went on a haunted ship. So that was kind of fun, and I was reading, because I was on the plane for a very long time, some scary stories that I figured would be good for my live. So yeah, let me see if I can find it. But I know I had the Kindle thing going on. Just bear with me. Oh, cool. Thank you for letting me know. I'm gonna lower it down. Okay. Hopefully that's better. Oh, you know what I think it is? It might be too close to the... We'll see. We'll see how much it is, but as long as you can hear it. Yay, it downloaded it. Of course I have to sign in, because what is life? And if I remember my password, because I don't remember my password. Thank you. Bomber! Okay, so... I'm trying to sign into my Kindle, so I'm sorry guys, bear with me. But yeah, so I just got back from a trip. I went to a haunted location. I got done filming an episode for Mysteries Decoded. So I can't wait to promote that later on this year. I never know what to say with these things because it's like it's kind of secret, but like not really. But yeah, I'm excited to share that with you guys. When it comes out, of course, and I don't get in trouble. But yeah, no, if you ever have the chance to go to the Lexington, please do. It was such a fun experience. It is haunted. There was some spooky things on there. I don't even know anymore. Jeez, really? Not another. I hate that, like, when you try to sign into things, like, you have to do a bunch of codes. How's everyone doing? Yeah, so I might be on a few episodes on Mysteries Decoded on the CW, so stay tuned for that. I am really, really lucky. Alright, so apparently I cannot sign into my damn Kindle, so there's that. But we still have some scary stories here. I am not coding. Just trying to remember. Okay. I don't know anymore. I don't know what is anything anymore. Trying to get into my Kindle. And I forgot my password.
As you guys know, I have lost. Watch
with the child.
This is a powerful antibiotic.
That scared me. Okay, so I'm trying to get into my Kindle. Not having luck with it. I was just on it. But you know, that's technology. Being a little bit slow with it. So I really wanted to read you guys the story from like this book that I was reading. Okay, there we go.
Is this creepy?
Waiting for things. I do have my email in my
Okay, can you give us a demonstration of how you do that?
Flip it around, turn it up, put it in the air.
Can you give us a little demonstration?
I'm just trying to get on my damn thing. Okay. So you can send me stories on my bio. So my email is in my bio. And yeah, I'm just trying to get into the Kindle so I can read you guys some stories because I had it up and then now I don't. Now I'm having issues, of course, because that's technology. It wouldn't be easy, right? But I feel like if I can do it on my phone, but if I do that, then I'm going to lose the live stream, if that makes sense. Huh. Oh, there we go. Okay, think I might be able to see something. Or I think I made some payways on here. I don't know about that. I'm just so sad that I can't get into my Kindle. But let's see. Thank you for being so patient with me, guys. Like, seriously. Of course. Wouldn't be smooth sailing with it, right? Is the music really loud too, by the way? I feel like... Go back to this. As long as you guys can hear me pretty well, because I don't want it to be too loud. I am live. Show me live. Have you heard of a disembodied voice sound? Have you ever heard of a... What do you mean, like, have I ever had an experience with, like, a voice? Yes, it's a very popular story. Well, not disembodied. I don't think I've ever heard of that, but I've heard someone mimic someone that I knew, like someone close that I knew. But there's that. Okay. Just gonna read from here and hopefully... you know. Hopefully you can hear me. I won't be able to see the comments, so I apologize until after I Okay. So we're just gonna begin the story, and I won't see your comments until I'm done reading the story. Alright. Where are we? Dun, dun, dun. Okay. This is called The Crying Kittens. When I was a child, we had an old cat that hung around in the barn on our property. One spring, she had a litter of kittens up in the hayloft. 7 kittens in all. The old cat wasn't a very good mother and had abandoned the kittens. And unfortunately, they were already dead by the time my brother and sister and I found them. We felt sorry for the kittens and decided to have a funeral for them down by the creek bank. We purloined one of the mother's old hat boxes from the attic, filled it with straw, and placed all the tiny lifeless bodies inside. After arriving at the creek with our makeshift coffin, we said a few words, and my older brother dug a hole with a shovel in the soft ground. Let me know if that was... Okay, cool. Sometime later, perhaps a week or more, my sister had gone to the place to place some fresh, picked wildflowers on the tiny grave. Imagine her surprise when she heard the sounds of kittens meowing. Thinking we had made a mistake and had buried the poor kittens alive, she ran back to the tiny house and got my brother and me. My brother grabbed the shovel out of the barn, and we flew down to the creek bank as fast as our feet could carry us. When we arrived, we could hear the faint sound of kittens as well. My brother soon uncovered the box, and we quickly pulled it out of the ground and ripped the lid of the box off. Much to our shock, we were greeted with the sight and the smell of 7 very deceased kittens. My sister took a stick and, holding her nose with one hand, gently prodded each tiny kitten. It was obvious they were all very dead. Mystified, we placed the box into the grave and covered it back up. From then on, for many years, we all continued to hear the muffled sounds of tiny kittens near the grave. We could only assume that we were hearing what were ghosts of these poor tiny creatures. Ooh. Creepy and sad. I rate that out of a 1 through 10. I kind of like that one. It was sad. It gave me chills. I rate that one a 7. Okay. Cool. Let's see what else we have here. Disintegrating people. This is a story of the weirdest thing I've ever encountered in the woods. It was a summer after my freshman year of high school, and my friends and I often went to the park. The lake and, quote, exact location were redacted from the original author's request. When the weather was nice, the lakeside park backs up to another state park that has lots of hilly terrain covered with hiking trails. It had become kind of cloudy on this particular day. So my friend Jenny and I thought we might explore in the woods and maybe try some of the hiking trails. As we ventured into the woods, we veered off the trail and came across what I can only describe as a primitive campsite. There was a lean-to made from pine boughs, a stone fire pit, and evidence that someone had been there recently. Namely, empty Coke cans and snack food wrappers. Jenny and I poked around the campsite for a bit, and growing bored, decided to venture further towards the lake. About 100 yards from the campsite, we happened upon one of the scariest things I had ever seen in my life. There on the ground, in the woods, were 2 complete sets of human clothing, 1 male and 1 female. It was laid out as if people were still in them. The man's outfit consisted of a lightweight tan windbreaker, a button-up shirt with a yellow checkered pattern, a white t-shirt, khaki pants, socks, and brown leather shoes. The t-shirt was inside the checked shirt, which was tucked into the pants. There was even belt in the pants. The socks were still in the bottom of the pant legs and went down into the shoes. The woman's ensemble was just as creepy. A pale blue windbreaker over a printed dress, with tan-colored hose ending inside a pair of penny loafers. Furthermore, the right arm of the man's clothing overlapped the left arm of the woman's clothing, giving the appearance that the couple had lain down on the forest floor and had been holding hands. Now, there was no bones or anything like that, and the clothing still appeared to be fairly in new state. It hadn't been in the woods very long. We prodded the clothes with a stick and heard what sounded like loose change or maybe car keys jingle in the pocket of the man's khakis. Suddenly, overcome by fear, Jenny began crying and said we needed to leave right now. I agreed. I was feeling totally scared and freaked out. It looked as if the couple was laying down and simply disappeared, leaving nothing but their clothes behind. By now, both of us were in tears, and we ran the rest of the way out of the woods. We debated over several days as to what we could do. Maybe call the cops, or take some other friends back and show them what we had found. We scoured the local papers for weeks, but never turned up any information about a missing couple. In the end, we decided the best thing to do was to keep it to ourselves and never go back into the woods. And we never have, and probably never will, although it has now been close to 15 years since the incident had occurred. Okay, then. Thank you for the soccer balls. Is that soccer balls? Okay, that one wasn't so bad. But anyway. I mean, could it be a prank? Maybe, right? I feel like perhaps they were pulling a prank on someone, because they said they checked the local newspapers. But I feel like if they were that scared, they should have definitely called the cops. Or like a park ranger. I think like that's the least that you could do. I don't know. I don't know what you would have done, but yeah, I would have definitely contacted a park ranger. Okay, what is this one? Nope, not this one. Okay, so this one is called Native American Spirits. It was Thanksgiving weekend, and my parents and I had traveled to the family farm to spend the holiday with my grandparents and some of my aunts and uncles and their children, so basically the whole family. The farm was expansive and covered with over 900 acres. In addition to many creeks and rivers, there were also many natural features such as caves and bluffs. This was centuries ago. The Native Americans had hunted and lived, so this area was predominant in that. My mom and dad and I were the first to arrive, and I decided to go out and explore. While waiting for my older cousins, Jerry and James showed up. I considered walking down to cross the creek and mess around in one of the many livestock barns, but I began to spit snow, so I decided to go to the other direction, down past the corn crib instead, and visit one of the indigenous bluffs that dotted the property. I made my way through the woods and down the steep bank above the bluff, carefully taking my time, as the snow was starting to stick a bit, which made for very tricky going. I finally arrived and went under the bluff and decided to build a small fire in the ancient fire pit to keep myself warm. I ventured a little ways out into the woods, gathering dried twigs, pine cones, with which to build my little fire. On my way back into the cavern-like area under the bluff, I thought I heard voices in the distance. I assumed it was Jerry and James, which had arrived and would soon be joining me. I continued building my fire as planned, and as soon had a nice little blaze going on in the fire pit, where the Native Americans, inhabitants of centuries ago, had cooked their meals. Every so often, I could still hear the sound of muffled voices in the distance. Thinking nothing of it, I continued tending my small fire and looking around in the loose soil underneath the bluff, hoping to find a lost arrowhead or two. At the same time, it wasn't uncommon to find these much prized pieces of workwood flint. I kicked at something in the dirt, thinking it might be an arrowhead, but it turned out to be a bone. Just as I pulled the bone from the dirt, the voices became louder. I walked to the opening of the bluff, expecting to see my cousins and share with what I found with them. Looking this way and that, I could still hear voices, but no one was in sight. At this point, the sound seemed to be coming from the top of the bluff. I decided to walk up and see if my cousins were on the top, perhaps trying to find the way I had used to climb down. When I reached the top of the bluff, however, there were still no signs of my cousins. I could still hear the muffled voices, but by now, it seemed to be coming from the bottom of the bluff instead of the top. At first, I was a little perplexed, but thought maybe Jerry and James had gone down the other side and we had missed each other in the process. So I began to task the making of my way back down, taking my time as there was a good dusting of snow on the path, which made it for a very slippery going. One wrong move and I could slide all the way down the steep hill past the bluff and end up getting soaked in the creek and maybe even injuring myself in the bargain. Taking my way along carefully, I made it back to the entrance to the cave and found myself still alone. So what was going on? I immediately thought of the bone that I had found, which I had stuck in my jacket pocket. It suddenly occurred to me that this might be human remains. It wasn't impossible, but to my knowledge, only one skeleton had been found in the cave years ago. The skeleton had been buried sitting up, suggesting the body had been that of a Native American chief. Under the bluff, I could still hear the muffled conversation, and as I strained to listen, it began to sound more and more like English was not the language being spoken. This sent shivers up my spine. Hurriedly, I replaced the bone in the soft earth where I had found it and covered it well. In my mind, I apologized to whoever or whatever I had disturbed. I had the growing feeling that I needed to leave this place as soon as possible, and which I did, as soon as I put out my little fire. When I got back to my grandparents' house, my cousins had just arrived and were still helping their parents carry food out of the car and into the house. I spent the rest of the evening pondering the events of that day, and the next morning when my cousins wanted to go exploring, I refused to go anywhere near that bluff. I never told them the reason, but they didn't seem to mind. as there were lots of other places to explore. I was a grown man before I ever ventured back into the bluff again. Although during those later occasions, I did not hear any more voices, and I also took care not to disturb any areas that I thought might be sacred to my ancestors. Well then. That was interesting. I mean, right? Like that's... They found what they could have thought was maybe a human bone. I don't know. So is the sound still good, you guys? Like, is the background sound still good? Let me know. Also, I got like these little, wait, I don't think you can see them. These are the Grinch and I can't show them. I got little Grinch stuff. Oh well. Thank you. As I scarf my face down. Growing up, I was told to leave everything alone from property shards and not to go by old dwellings. Why do you think that is, Richard? I think that's how you say your name, right? Or Rich. I mean, it made me think of like Skinwalker Ranch. But that is kind of creepy. Also, like, okay, I know I have done hiking and stuff when I lived in Colorado by myself, but now when I think about it, like, could I really ever go into the caves by myself and just hang out? Like, I don't think I could do that. I don't know. And then also to, like, hear voices, I would have been gone. But that's just me. Alright, I'm gonna start the new story after I'm done stuffing my face. Okay, this one's called The Abandoned House. This happened in the mountains of North Carolina. My husband at the time was in the military and we were stationed at Camp Lejeune. Sorry if I mispronounced that. I don't live in North Carolina. Anyway, one weekend, we and another military couple decided to go camping in the rugged Appalachian Mountains on the other side of the state. After setting up camp, we decided to hike around for a bit in the hilly mountains, mountainous terrains. Deep in the woods, in a little hollow, imagine our surprise when we chanced upon an abandoned Victorian house. It was almost overgrown with kudzu vines, but we were still managed to find a way inside and decided to explore. Once in, we were amazed at the surprisingly good condition of inside the house. Upon further inspection, we found the house to be fully furnished, and also found clothing and even old children's toys. It was more than a little creepy, and we all got this feeling that we shouldn't be there. It was as if the people who lived there had just stepped out and would return at any moment. Our husbands were just as mystified as we girls were. Although they didn't seem as scared, my husband, Richard, even began checking the walls for any hidden passages, thinking perhaps the family had gone into the hiding for some reason and then perished and trapped inside the walls. I can't express how much the house still looked like it was lived in. There was clothing laid out and still made beds. There was and plates and silverware set out on the dinner table. Everything was covered with somewhat heavy layer of dust. However, it was obvious the place had been lived in for decades. This was in the early 1960s, although the musty calendar on the kitchen wall was from 1909. What was even possible that no one had entered this place Was it even possible that no one had ever entered this place in over 50 years? The longer we spent in the house, the more scared my female friend and I began to get, eventually becoming almost hysterical. Eventually, after much pleading, our husbands decided we should leave, although they would have been happier to stay and explore the house more. After we had left, the shivers wore off. All we could do is discuss on the drive back home how it was isolated, and it was literally in the middle of the woods, and the nearest paved highway was miles away. A few weeks later, our husbands planned a trip back alone to continue exploring. My friend and I were fine with that. Although I was curious about the house, I had no desire to visit it again after the sense of fright that had enveloped me there. However, when the guys came back home the Sunday evening after they had planned to trip, the story became even stranger. Although they were sure of the exact location, they had been unable to find the house and had spent the entire weekend wandering the woods. Even though they had remembered and recognized natural landmarks, no trace of the house could be found. They even stopped at the roadside general store a dozen or so miles from where the house had been. And when they inquired about the house, the proprietor empathically denied that any such house had existed. When my husband and his friends persisted, the man at the general store suddenly became angry and told them to leave, adding that if they knew what was good for them, they should forget the house and never come back. They ignored the warning and went back on 2 other occasions, but could never find the house again. And like that, the owner of the general store and any of the locals who they chanced upon and asked about the place refused to talk about it or even acknowledge it. I know what we saw, and I know that it was real, but not being able to find it again and the local folks not wanting to talk about it only adds on to the mystery. Did we chance upon the site of some unspeakable tragedy? I may never know the answer, but I will always wonder about the abandoned house deep in the woods. That is very, very interesting. And spooky. You know what, though? It makes me think of something that actually happened to my friend in high school. So I had I had 2 friends. They were dating. I had a best friend who was dating one of my friends in high school. And around this time, so I lived in Minnesota, in a small town in Minnesota. And so at that time, the norm was to go out into the woods and go exploring. People would go hiking, or they would have like little camping trips or go fishing. Like, that's the thing to do in Minnesota. And what was really interesting was that my friend, they had a music festival, and they decided to take the shortcut in the woods to get to her house before curfew. I don't know if you guys have ever had curfew in your hometown, but we did. It was like 9 o'clock or something like that. So anyway, like, they cut through the shortcuts of the woods, and they found these like small, like miniature houses. And like, it was random because it wasn't small enough to be like a dollhouse, but it wasn't big enough to be like a full house or like a little playhouse for like children. And they like saw it from afar, like off the path. And I think like they managed to get close to at least one of the little houses, and there was like nothing in it. And I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. So we tried to go back to find it, could never find it. And she had gone even before me again, could not find it. And that's why she took me again, took me and went again, because she was like really persistent with trying to find this house, these little miniature houses. And a while ago, I think this was like back in mid 2020, early 2021, but there was like a TikTok about like, and I know this is where it gets like really conspiracy, like supernatural, but I saw someone made this TikTok on these like miniature houses that you find in the woods, and like if you ever find these houses, to like not go near it or something like that. And I can't remember who or what made this TikTok, or if it was a joke or whatever, but regardless, it just sent me chills because it made me think of my friend from high school. And I really wish I had communications with that friend so we could talk about it. But like, that was one of the strangest things ever. And you got to keep in mind too that like when you live in a small town and you walk through these like areas through the woods, like you kind of know the woods of that town like the back of your hand for the most part. Like most of us did. I can't tell you how many times I would spend the night out camping with my friends out there. We would throw bonfires, or you know, like fishing and stuff. Like I just knew that area pretty well. So I always think about that. And now that story made me think of that. It's really eerie. Anyways. Alright, so let's get on with another story. So this one is called Footprints in the Snow. The weirdest thing that I ever saw in the woods happened when I was just a boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old. It had snowed heavily the night before, so I was enjoying a day off from school. It had been canceled due to the weather. By walking around in the early morning snow, covered in silence. I was quite a ways back in the woods, maybe a mile or so, when I happened upon some footprints. They were human footprints, but smaller than my feet, so I assumed they belonged to a child, maybe 5 or 6. And to top it off, whoever had left the prints in the snow had been barefoot. It was about 34 degrees and much too cold for anyone, let alone a child, to be out wandering barefoot in the snow, no less. I noticed right away that there were no footprints, bare or otherwise, leading up to where the tiny footprints began. I followed the prints for a few hundred yards where they abruptly ended in a small clearing. I looked around, even up in the trees, but could find no trace of the small child who had made the prints. I followed them back again to where they began, still just as mystified as ever. Still puzzled, I made my way over to my friend's house and told him about what I had seen. He got dressed for the weather, and we both trekked back out into the woods. When we arrived, the footprints were still very much visible, but just barely. The freshly fallen snow was filling them in. We scoured the entire area for maybe a square mile, but never found more footprints or any evidence of the child who made the ones we both observed that day. To this day, I still can find no rational explanation. That's my story of the weirdest thing I had ever encountered in the woods, and I'm glad I have a witness who will back it up. That was giving me chills. I was kind of jumpy. And I do get pretty jumpy when I read some of these stories sometimes, so it adds on to the fun, I say. I don't think I don't have any similar stories to that, honestly. I can't. Oh my god, thank you for the flowers, Caesar. Thank you so much. Oh, that's awesome. I think like the one story, and I made a TikTok on this a couple years ago. Can you imagine, like TikTok has been a thing now. Well, it was a thing before 2020, but like, can you imagine like how many years the popularity of TikTok in the last couple of years? Anyway, I made a TikTok on my grandfather who found footprints, and when I looked it up more, it's like a cryptid called the Curupira. It's like a South American, Central American, like cryptid or something like that. Anyway, but yeah, thank you so much. Awesome. That's the only thing I can think of that it made me think of that, but I don't know. All right, so this one is called Evil in the Woods. The weirdest, creepiest stuff I had ever found in the woods happened when I was a teenager. I've only been driving a few years, and I had an old 71 Chevrolet Impala. It was a road boat and a gas guzzler for sure, but I loved to get it out at night and drive around by the moonlight. There was an abandoned subdivision tract I had found during my ramblings, and I decided to go back one night and check it out. There were no houses, only what seemed like miles of paved road that went far back into the hills. The original developer had gone bankrupt, which is why it was left in the state it was in. All the building lots long overgrown with brush and sapling pines. On this particular night, I had found the furthest extreme of the paved road blocked by a fallen tree. Feeling somewhat adventurous, I got out of my car with a flashlight to see if the tree could be moved. However, it was a beast of an old rotten oak and it was weighing a ton. There was no way I could move it by myself. Deciding that I wasn't finished exploring for the night, I decided to lock my car and go ahead on foot. I figured since the road was blocked, I was safe as there was no one else in the area. After about half a mile, the pavement stopped and continued on a gravel road leading up a steep hill. I sailed forth, undaunted, happily stomping along in the gravel road, enjoying the noise it made as it crunched beneath my boots. At the top of the hill, the gravel road ended as well, and now the road became nothing more than a rutted path through the high weeds and bars. And through all of that were huge trees flanking either side. I was still feeling adventurous and decided to press on, determined to see how far I could go and where I would eventually end up. About half a mile along the footpath, it curved sharply to the right. At the corner where it curved, I was playing my flashlight over the woods when the beam suddenly struck something out of the ordinary. On the slope of a short, steep bank, someone had fashioned a crude arrow shape out of some logs and branches of varying sizes. It looked too perfect to be random, so I was sure it was some kind of trail marker. I debated for a couple minutes and then decided to abandon the path and see where the primitive trail marker led. At the crest of the bank where the arrow pointed, I found another narrow but well-worn path which led deeper into the woods, and I forged ahead, enjoying the adventure and solace that comes with being out in nature. The path twisted and turned a bit, but was leading uphill to the top of the ridge. When I arrived at the top after a good half hour of hiking, I thought I would perhaps be met with a vista overlooking the city or a nearby lake. Instead, what I found made my blood run cold. Where the ground leveled out in a fairly large clearing was a gigantic pentagram made from a carefully arranged logs. And I mean, this thing was huge. There were other logs set up aside of the circle of the pentagram, which reminded me of altars. There was also upside-down crosses planted at various spots. By now, I was eventually sweating and shaking, jumping at every sound I heard, and playing my flashlight all over the trees, trying to catch sight of anyone who might be hiding. I caught a glimpse of something in the middle of the large pentagram and shined my light on it for a better look. It turned out to be the remains of some large bird, perhaps even a duck or a goose, which had been burned. I realized that whoever had done all this was serious about it. It was too intricate for just some metalhead kids messing around out in the woods. This was some sort of satanic type cult or group or whatever, which meant to perform blood sacrifices. I decided it was high time I get out of there, and I started moving out there as fast as I dared back through the woods. After what seemed like hours, I finally arrived back at my car. Written in mud across my windshield was a single word: beware. I grabbed an old t-shirt out of the back seat and scrubbed it off the best I could, and then jumped in, silently praying my car would have start. Thankfully, it did, and I'm sure I broke the speed limit all the way home. I've never shared my experience with anyone, and I never went exploring anywhere near that subdivision or surrounding woods again. It still frightens me to this day to think that what might have happened if I had shown up on the wrong night or at the wrong time and happened across these people and their evil practices in the woods. I still have a sense of adventure, but learned some very valuable lessons that night. Never go exploring alone. Always let someone know where you're going, and realize that there are some things that are better left alone. People who do things in secret and hide out in sight do so for a reason. As that crudely written message on my car windshield stated, beware. Okay, that was creepy. Oh wow, yeah, I bet you do. Yeah, okay, that was creepy. I don't know, that was creepy. Like, I like how he decided to, like, grab a shirt from the back seat and scrub off the beware. It's like, girlfriend, I would have gone in the car and just sped off. I would not be sitting out there scrubbing no mud off my window. I would have been like, girl, bye. I'm gonna drive away as fast as I can and then scrub it off where there's some light or some civilization. I mean, or maybe unless he couldn't see. But even then, like, you can get in the car, lock your door, and like, you know, spray like the windshield stuff. I'm forgetting the name of it. Uh, but yeah, no, he took the time to scrub it off. Unless his car didn't have it, is my other theory, but it should have something, right? I don't know. That's scary. That was scary. I'm still laughing at that, like, yeah, let me just take my shirt off and scrub, or take the shirt from the back seat and scrub the creepy word. Because that's not an opportunity to have someone just sneak up behind me. I've been putting up maintenance at a large tuner home, attic spaces. Yeah, no thank you. Oh my goodness. Also, like, attic spaces with all the bugs and everything too. And also depends where you live, but I know in Minnesota my attic had like a bunch of bats in it, and I don't think we ever really like got rid of the bats. But yeah, that was scary. That one creeped me out. Out of all the ones we read tonight, that one was starting to give me the heebie-jeebies for sure. Like, that made me not even want to ever go out, like at night. No. Okay, so the other ones I read, but I haven't read this one, so we're gonna wing this one. So this one's called The Monster in the Woods. This was back in the late 60s, and my friend Eddie and I had taken our dogs out hunting at night. We were hunting coons and possums, and the dogs were well trained at treeing those animals. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we hadn't had much luck. We had walked all the way across the farmlands and ended up in the edge of the river. We decided to take a break on the riverbank and let the dogs run free for a bit to see if they could flush any animals out of hiding. We sat on a high bank overlooking the river, smoked a couple of cigarettes, and just listened to the sounds of rushing water. After about an hour, we started getting tired and decided we better call the dogs and then start making our way back. This is where things started to get weird. First of all, when we called the dogs, they wouldn't come. Anyone who's ever used hounds to hunt coons or possums know that these dogs will come when called, even if they have an animal on thread. Our dogs, 4 in all, would have come within maybe a couple of dozen yards if we were standing on the riverbank, but wouldn't come any closer. We started walking down where the dogs were, and when we came upon them, we saw that they were frightened and whimpering and even had their tails between their legs. Now, these dogs weren't exactly ferocious, like a pit bull or anything, but coonhounds tend to be very brave. I've had several dogs who have lost chunks of their ears and also have been bitten and clawed at by coons and possums, because coons and possums will put up a fight to the finish, even against a creature that is several times their size. But these dogs were scared. I mean, truly scared. And it was definitely something we were not used to seeing out of otherwise great and valuable hunting dogs. About this time, we heard a commotion on the bank by where we had just been sitting. It sounded like a large animal was coming up the bank. The dogs grew even more afraid and were now covering behind our legs and letting out high-pitched yelps and whines. The batteries on Eddie's flashlight had already given out, but mine was still working, although somewhat very dimly. I flashed a beam over the area to see what was making the noise. In the dim beam, I saw what looked like a man, or at least the shape of one, but unlike any man I had ever seen. He would have had been 8 to 10 feet tall. I called out, asking the person to identify himself, and also stated that we were armed. The thing just stood there, as if it was eyeing us. The dogs, although now on leashes, were still making a racket and trying to pull us away. After there was no response, I fired a shot in the air. Whatever it was wouldn't budge, but instead let out a low, groaning noise, almost a growl. Whatever it was, it sounded hostile. We tried to set the dogs on it, but that was a lost cause. The hounds were out of their minds with fear at this point, even wetting themselves. Suddenly I noticed a stench. It was way worse than any skunk I had ever smelled, more like rotting garbage. Eddie and I tried to fire 2 more shots, one each, in the general direction of the creature. At this point, it let out a loud yowl, which made their hair stand up on my arms. I let the dogs go, and they took off towards where our pickup truck was parked. The beast suddenly turned and jumped or dove off the bank, and we heard a huge splash as it hit the water. Shaken Eddie and I decided that now would be a good time to make ourselves scarce. We headed back for the truck. We got the dogs, running them up, and got out of there. I've told the story to several people, some of who concluded we ran into a bear. This doesn't sound right to me. First of all, there are no bears in this area, and certainly not any would be this large. Furthermore, what little of it I was able to catch sight of the light and the flashlight, it looked like a man, only very big and very tall. There have been no further sightings I'm aware of in that area, but due to the size of the creature, the unique smell and the noises it made, I think we came across a Bigfoot. I've read similar stories about how dogs react to creatures as well, and that further convinced me. It wasn't scared of us, our dogs, or our guns, so I certainly don't want to encounter it again under those circumstances. Okay, that is very interesting. I feel like Bigfoot sightings are very interesting. I mean, I don't know. I feel like the $1 million question, do I believe in Bigfoot? I don't know if I believe in Bigfoot, but I've had like really close friends of mine's tell me that they firmly believe that they saw a Bigfoot outside of their tent. I've had family members tell me that they, seen Bigfoot, or like Bigfoot has been outside of their like cabins. I think that like what really piques my interest with Bigfoot is that whether it's real or not, I just think it's so interesting how so many people around the world have seen a form of Bigfoot. And I just think that like whenever, in general, right, like whenever people see something so commonly on a global scale, I can't help but wonder, what is going on out there? What are they seeing? You know what I mean? I don't know. Especially when like the people that I know who have seen Bigfoot, it's like these people are not just like believers of everything under the sun, but yeah, I don't know. I think Bigfoot is a very fascinating thing. I've also read that like in some cultures, if I'm not mistaken, there was like the one sighting in Alaska or something like that, where they believe that Bigfoot isn't necessarily like a physical entity, it's more of like a spiritual entity. But I don't know. I just think the whole Bigfoot phenomenon is very, very interesting. And yeah, what wouldn't, what story isn't scary unless there's a Bigfoot sighting in the woods, right? Okay. Yeah, definitely. Like, I think so there was like this whole there's a story of this like ghost town in Alaska, and I was reading, like, I've heard one version of it, and then I've heard another version of like of that ghost town, and I can't remember the name of it for right now, but yeah, some indigenous people in Alaska believe that that was like the spirit of that area trying to scare off people that shouldn't be in that area. So yeah, there's that, and I think that's fascinating. Let's see if I can find another one. Okay, so this one is called The Strangeness in the Smokies. I spent a great deal of time hiking in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on both eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina sides. The mountains derive their names from the smoke that seems to hang in the trees of the deep forest. From what I've heard, the Cherokee gave the mountains this name. Now, the Smokies are a vast expanse of wilderness. It's easy to get lost and turned around there. I can attest to this fact, having been temporarily lost a few times myself. There are also some unexplained disappearances in the mountains. A brief search online will give you more information. Bringing up such tragic missing person stories as young as Dennis Martin, teenager Trenny Gibson, and retiree Thelma Melton, these people have been missing for decades, and no trace of them has ever been found. I mentioned that to tell you this: there is a strangeness in the mountains. There are places that, although they represent nature at its finest, have also a very eerie, creepy feeling. I've experienced it firsthand on many occasions. One memorable instance that springs to mind was when I made one of my many hikes up to Klingman's Dome, the highest point in the park. It's a tough hike, the trail feeling like you're almost walking straight up the places. The incline is so steep in some parts you can literally reach out and touch the trail in front of you as you ascend. On one particular occasion, I had inexplicably decided to wander a little ways off the trail, having seen some beautiful mountains, laurel plants in a nearby hollow. Now, like I was saying, it's very easy to become disoriented in the deep woods, and going off the trail is not recommended for even the most seasoned mountain hiker. But even knowing better off, I went, thinking it's just a walk in a straight line and therefore make it easy to find my way back to the trail. I made it to the hollow and was admiring the mountain laurel patch when I decided to venture up the bank and see what was above the little hollow. As I cleared to the top of the bank, I spotted an ancient oak tree off in the distance. I decided to go have a look at the massive giant of a tree, which was really easily centuries old. As I stood looking up at the towering oak, I noticed a little path leading off to one side, probably left by deer or other animals that live in the park. I ducked under the overhang in the brush and pushed my way along the little game trail. The trail ended and I found myself in a small clearing, and this is where it gets really weird. It was suddenly as if the whole forest became silent. I didn't hear a bird or the wind in the leaves or anything. It was the most deafening silence I have ever encountered. I stood in the clearing a long time, marveling the silence. It was like being in a vacuum. Suddenly, I felt very drowsy and had to fight the urge to just stretch out and go to sleep. It was as if the woods was luring me into a dream-like state. Eventually, the strange paralysis seemed to lift, and I began to hear the noises of the forest again. I made my way back to the trail, somewhat alarmed that the sun was starting to set. All in all, I figured I must have stood transfixed for over an hour. I often wonder if I might have a period of missing time regarding this episode. So if you find yourself in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, take care and notice your surroundings, and be very wary of the mystical effects of the park. I feel like if I had followed temptation and stretched out for a nap, I might have been one of those souls who are lost and never heard from again. Ooh, okay. Well then. I will say, on a non-supernatural note, you don't ever want to get off the trails, because you might not know what you will find in terms of like wild animals and stuff. I mean, I've done a lot of hiking out in Colorado, so I don't think I've ever felt the need to get off any trails. And I know this is different because he's like talking about like North Carolina, that part of the world, but yeah, no, don't ever do it. Don't ever get off the trail. Don't ever get off the trail. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up. I need to go to sleep soon. Alright guys, I will talk to you later.